Okay. All right, so thank you for having me, everybody. My name is Emily Putz, and I'm a Habitat Stewardship Coordinator for Nature Saskatchewan's Stewards of Saskatchewan Programs. So today I'm here to present on our Stewards of Saskatchewan Programs, Habitat Conservation through Community Science. Oh, am I sharing my screen?
Yes, you are.
Yes, the right one? Okay, just making sure. All right, so today I'm going to quickly go over Nature Saskatchewan as a whole and how we engage the public. And then I'm going to spend most of the time on our community science stewardship programs. So Nature Saskatchewan, a little about us. So we were founded in the 40s, originally developed to promote our Blue Jay Journal, which hosts observation and study data from Saskatchewan naturalists, and as well to serve as a platform for our members to bring issues of importance to them to the government. So in the 60s, one of our biggest accomplishments was adding our voice to the campaign for Grasslands National Park. And then in the 80s, we began to get more involved with conservation in the province and research, and supported research studies on endangered and threatened species. So we are a non-government charitable organization. We're member-based and affiliated with 16 local nature societies, as well as nationally with Nature Canada. We currently have 7 full-time staff running our programming, 4 of us on the Stewards of Saskatchewan programs, and the rest of our work is all volunteer-driven, so we rely a lot on our members and volunteers. So what do we do? How do we engage the public? So we say that we are a voice for nature in Saskatchewan. So we are involved a little bit in advocacy work on a wide variety of topics. So some recent examples include the release of the PFRA's Chaplain Wind Farm, and we continue to be involved with greater sage-grouse issues. And that is mostly our executive director. So if you'd like more information on that work, you can contact him directly. So we encourage youth to build a relationship with nature. So we get kids involved with nature and help them connect to it through experiences, games, songs. Lacey, our education manager, works a lot in the schools. That's where she spends most of her time with school programming. We bring people together in the field. So as I mentioned, we are affiliated with local nature societies. So we help them with their events and advertising to get people out with them, as well as we also host our spring and fall meets ourselves in different areas around the province to try and get people out and experiencing these unique areas. And we include guest speakers and information sessions in those meets. Nature Saskatchewan also holds and leases 8 properties around the province. Most of them are to the north, but our newest property was actually bequeathed to us by a longtime Stewards of Saskatchewan participant, and it's in the south. It's by Leader, so that's kind of a unique property, and we encourage everybody to get out, and they're welcome to come onto these properties and kind of make a connection with nature that way. We are also a small book publisher. So of course, since the 40s, we've been publishing our Blue Jay Journal, which is quarterly, as well as we have several field guides on dragonflies, lichens. We help publish the floras of Saskatchewan. We have some of our biggest publications recently was the Birds of Saskatchewan book, which is a full color 800-page compendium on all bird species in Saskatchewan. So it's kind of a big one for us, as well as recently we published the Backyard Bird Feeding Guide. We also support research in the province. So we run the Last Mountain Bird Observatory banding station. And we also have a graduate student scholarship. So we support research work that way. And where we spend a lot of our time is we encourage people in community science. So we encourage everyone to get involved in collecting their own data through community science projects, through programs like Naturehood, Nature Watch, our important bird areas caretaker network with our IBAs, and through, of course, our species at risk stewardship programs, which I'll talk about a lot in a minute here. So these programs engage the public of all ages to collect their own data and spend time outside, developing their own connections with the environment around them. And for those of you that don't know the term community science, you might have heard citizen science as well. So it's just a term used to describe public participation in science projects. So our Stewards of Saskatchewan programs, I mentioned that is a giant community science project that we run. So the Stewards of Saskatchewan programs work with landowners towards habitat conservation for species at risk. As mentioned, we do this by relying on community science as our approach to engage landowners and land managers in habitat conservation through voluntary stewardship. A little backgrounder on why we choose this approach. So it's estimated that only 13% of Saskatchewan native prairie remains, in some areas as low as 2%. And not surprisingly, habitat loss is a major factor contributing to the decline of prairie species. Since 85% of southern Saskatchewan grasslands are privately managed or owned, engaging those landowners is key to meaningful conservation of habitat species at risk conservation, as well as prairie conservation as a whole. So we work with those landowners to conserve habitat through our Stewards of Saskatchewan programs, which are actually a suite of 5 programs that are all modeled and originating with Operation Burrowing Owl. So Operation Burrowing Owl, it was initiated way back in the 80s. So next year is its 35th anniversary. So it's a pretty long-running program. And it was originally initiated to conserve grassland parcels used by burrowing owl pairs in the province. As you guys likely know, burrowing owls are an endangered bird that have steep declines. So that was, Operation Burrowing Owl, that was in 1987. And then after its success, we followed it with Rare Plant Rescue, which was initiated in 2002. And like the other programs, it was modeled after Operation Burrowing Owl. So it does work a little bit different than our other programs. I'll get into it in a little bit more a little later, but it's a little more hands-on. And Rare Plant Rescue, it targets 8 federally listed species at risk, and then 7 additional provincially rare plant species as kind of our target species to base our work off of. So following Rare Plant Rescue, Shrubs for Shrinks was piloted in 2002 and then officially launched in 2003. So it targets loggerhead shrike, which if you guys don't know, they're really, really cool songbirds. So they're predatory and they prey on small prey species like insects and small rodents. And they'll actually, because they don't have, the talons of hawks, they'll impale their prey. So yeah, they're a pretty cool species and people pretty excited to have them on their property. And then in 2008, we launched Plovers on Shore, which target piping plovers, which is an endangered shorebird. And we have a large amount of their breeding population in Saskatchewan. So it's an important species for us. And then in 2010, it was identified that we had several landowners that really wanted to participate, but might not have had, the big species like burrowing owls or piping plovers. But they might have had barn swallows or monarch butterflies or frugious hawks, Sprague's pipits, and they wanted to get involved in conservation too. So we launched the Stewards of Saskatchewan banner program for all other species at risk in 2010. So altogether in these 5 programs, we currently have 1,000 participants, nearly 1,000. I think we're 5 off of 1,000 currently, conserving nearly 730,000 acres of land. I should mention that all our numbers are approximate right now as we're still compiling our 2021 field season data. So our numbers are changing daily. So these programs are aimed in conserving prairie habitat for all prairie species, not just our targets. But by focusing on our target species, we not only work for the recovery of those specific species, but we allow them to serve as ambassadors for habitat conservation of their respective habitats. So for example, piping plovers are ambassadors for shoreline habitat needs in Saskatchewan, while burrowing owls represent the native prairie they rely on. By using these species as symbols that the public can care about, we allow people to form a connection, which in turn contributes to the drive to continue to see these species on their working landscapes. So landowners are really the driving factor to keep these species here with us for future generations. They're the ones out there managing the land and the ultimate deciders on keeping it intact and healthy. Without them, the species would be gone. So our programs only work through engaging this community directly. We do this through a variety of methods, which I'll go through. And while all our programs focus on different species, they all share the same basic 4 components of conservation, population monitoring, enhancement of existing habitat, and the continued education and outreach of our stewards and programs. So I'm just going to go through all those 4 components of our program. So the first one, conservation, we do this through signed voluntary habitat stewardship agreements. These agreements that the landowner signs, the landowner agrees to not knowingly destroy existing habitat or nesting locations for their species, and to report annually on how the species are doing on their property. We've found that most landowners are willing to participate in a voluntary stewardship program, especially in which they receive information and guidance on their species and encouragement and recognition for their work towards conserving habitat for them. Our agreements are what we call handshake agreements. So that means they're not legally binding and can be canceled at any time. And these are often seen as like a low risk option to the landowner because it's not going to impact, their sale value of their land or restrict what they might be able to do on their land. That being said, even though they're seen as low risk, voluntary stewardship is still proven to be very effective. It has been shown that land with an agreement is more likely to be conserved than land without any type of protection. And not only are these agreements effective at a voluntary level, but they're a good kind of jumping off point, an attractive first step towards stronger forms of protection like conservation easements in the future. We personally no longer do conservation easements, but we partner with a lot of organizations that do. So we promote them through our printed materials and on our on-site visits. And if any of our landowners are interested in going that step, then we can definitely direct them. So the second component of our programs is population monitoring, and this is where we spend most, I'd say a large percentage of our time year to year. So many of our species have little known about their current numbers and ranges. The birds and other animals like to move around, so we need accurate ideas of where they might be in the province year to year. And plants stay in one spot, but they're generally, not looked for a whole lot, and so there's huge gaps in their occurrence data. So population monitoring, we do this in 2 ways. And since we only have 3 staff, we really rely on our stewards. So this is where the community science aspect comes in to play in a big way. So our landowner participants are really our eyes and ears on the ground to collect this data. And by involving our landowners, we can collect like a large number of data that, the three coordinators, the three of us wouldn't typically be able to collect that amount in a year. As well as directly involving the landowners really helps them connect with the program and see how their birds are doing year to year. So our landowners really like, reporting, keeping an eye out for their birds and getting a connection that way. So as mentioned, we do population monitoring in two main ways. So for our bird programs, so BSAR stands for Bird Species at Risk. We use acronyms a lot if you see them anywhere else in the presentation. So our bird species at risk monitoring of enrolled sites is done exclusively through our landowners via our annual census. So once a year, they get this card in the mail, and we ask them whether they've seen their species, but also further information like how the habitat's doing, have they changed their land use, and then for some of the species we ask associated species questions, like for burrowing owls, we ask, has there been badgers present? How's the ground squirrel population doing? And we collect a lot of information year to year. The census also allows us to stay connected with anybody that has specific questions, comments, or would like more information. We always ask at the bottom here whether they'd like any more information. And this allows us to keep in touch when we might not be able to visit directly with them in that year. As mentioned, we have 1,000 participants and there's 3 of us. So we can't get out to everybody every year, and the census keeps us in touch. So the other population monitoring we do is for our plants. So that works a little bit differently. I mentioned rare plant rescue is a little different than the other programs. So for rare plants, we don't expect the landowner to go out and search and monitor themselves. Rare plants are very hard to find, have several tricky lookalikes, and there's vast isolated stretches of habitat that it would be tricky for the landowner to collect information on for us. So rare plant rescue is unique that we actually do a lot of the legwork ourselves. So it consists of searching and monitoring work done directly by the staff. So suitable habitat for a target species is sought out by the RPR coordinator, which is myself. And then with permission from the landowner, I then send out our search crew to survey for the target rare plant species on their property. So this work has proven successful in finding previously unknown occurrences of our target species in the province. And it also forms the basis for new landowner participation in the program, because that's how we approach our new landowners for our plants. Ask them to search, and then especially if we find anything, people are generally pretty excited to have something rare like that on their property, and then we can talk to them about the program. So once a plant occurrence is known to occur, we conduct ground population monitoring every 3 to 5 years for each occurrence. So we kind of have a monitoring schedule, and we'll revisit all the ones that we've found in the past. So this is a great way to keep in touch with our program participants, because the rare plant rescue participants don't get that census card in the mail. So we like to do some visits with them while we're out monitoring. And all the data we collect is then used by Environment Canada to learn about these species distribution and life cycles. And it has contributed to 3 down listings in the past, as well as critical habitat work. So yeah, we like to think we contribute a lot to those plant species in the province. So additionally, we also do some field work ourselves for sightings in the summer. So we do conduct grid road searches for target bird species, as well as we collect species data through public sightings, so our public toll-free hoot line. And I have the number at the end if you guys see anything out there and like to call our hoot line. So in both cases here for the grid road searches and for public sightings, we do follow up on the location with the landowner who owns the land that the sighting occurred on. And then we talk to them about our program. And then that way we introduce more people into our network of participants. So all our population data with permission of the landowner is shared with the Conservation Data Center, as well as the recovery team leads, where it can then contribute to decision making and species recovery. Our population data, which is collected by our stewards, contributes to like a large amount of the data that Saskatchewan Conservation Data Center hosts for these species. For example, our burrowing owl data consists of about 50% of their total burrowing owl data. So that's our population monitoring component. The next one is through habitat enhancement of existing habitat that's enrolled in our programs. So many of our participants are already doing a lot for their species. We like to say that if they currently have those species on their land, then they're doing something right for that species, because otherwise they wouldn't be there. For those that want to do more, though, we do provide them with site-specific species at risk beneficial management practice plans, which is a mouthful. We call them BMPs. And those plans can then help them make informed management decisions. So these plans highlight practices that they are currently doing that benefit their species, as well as it makes recommendations on things they can consider implementing in the future. These recommendations are always being updated, and we work closely with our partners to make sure that we're giving the best information out there, and that we're taking into consideration how one recommendation might affect another species. So, for example, if we say, hey, maybe burrowing owls like this, that is not going to negatively affect what monarchs are doing, for example, or monarchs need. So since 2009, we've given out over 450 of these plans. So 2009 was when we started giving them out. So yeah, we've given out a large amount. We also understand that some of these recommendations might come at a cost to the landowner. So to help offset this cost and encourage implementation, and as a benefit of participating in our programs, we do have project funding for 50-50 cost share projects that improve habitat. So these projects are generally a win-win situation for both landowners and wildlife, because they usually help the landowner do something that they've been wanting to do anyways, and then they're beneficial for our target species as well. So we have 4 types of enhancement projects that we fund. So we do native seeding projects to seed land back to native. We do alternative water source development projects. So this could be digging a new dugout for areas that pipits and burrowing owls might be in to encourage grazing, or to move a water source away from the shoreline where piping plovers might be nesting. So with like solar pumps and stuff, we'll fund those. We also fund wildlife-friendly fencing projects to, again, promote grazing in areas that wouldn't otherwise be grazed. And new this year, we just started funding first hawk nesting site fencing. So that's fencing around if a landowner has a hawk pole or a big old tree that has a Furgus hawk nest in it. We can fund fencing around it to prevent cattle from disturbing the site or knocking down the pole, things like that. So since we started doing these projects in 2000, we funded 150 of them. And this and out of those 150 projects, we've converted 15,000 acres of cropland, seeded back to grassland. 74 miles of strategic fence has been installed, 18 watering sites established, and 5 Frugious hawk nesting sites fenced just this year, actually, that last one. Enhanced sites are also monitored specifically for use by burrowing owls. And on average, in a year, 3 to 5 burrowing owl pairs are reported on enhanced sites, which are about 10 to 20% of the owls that we have reported back to us in a year. So they are using these enhanced sites. And lastly, our last component of the programs is our outreach and education work, where we work hard to establish new connections as well as maintaining effective current relationships with landowners in our stewardship programs. So for our landowners, we do this through communication with one-on-one visits. We spend a lot of our summer visiting with our participants and talking about their concerns, sharing information with them. We also host conservation appreciation dinners around the province. I'll talk about them in a minute here. We raise awareness through program updates and through our newsletter and calendar, which are a perk for our landowners of being in the program. And our newsletter hosts articles on our partners, what our partners are up to, new programs that our landowners might be interested in, funding opportunities for our landowners, as well as just an update on how our programs are doing year to year. So they're a great resource source, as well as our species at risk calendar that we give our participants each year. Often feature photographs from our participants, so that's kind of a nice recognition for them, as well as they let you know when our target species are, might be nesting or fledging or blooming, some life cycle things in there for them. As well as we just provide resources to our landowners. So we do give out our rare plant pocket guide, which has our target species in it. And then all our landowners get a conservation toolbox that has so many things in them, good resources for our landowners to look into. We also work to raise awareness of these little known species with the general public. And we do this through news releases that we release several times a year to local newspapers. We have wanted ads in local newspapers as well. This is a big version of one that we actually hang up in RM offices, but we have smaller versions, so we put in newspapers as well. And through presentations, so we do a lot of presentations, events. We have a lot of trade show booths, obviously in non-COVID years when those things are happening. So we try and get people out there knowing about these species, because then we have more eyes on the ground that can report them, and that just feeds into our community science approach there. So I did mention that one of our biggest outreach activities is our conservation appreciation suppers, which we host 2 to 3 times a year. Obviously right now they are virtual, but usually they are hosted and catered locally around the province in rural areas. They're free to attend, and while invitations specifically go out to our participants, they're welcome. The entire community is welcome to them. We often, let the RM offices know and might post something in the local newspaper, and the whole community is welcome to attend. So the evenings host a locally catered meal, as well as we try and get a guest speaker of a burrowing owl from the Burrowing Owl Interpretive Center to come visit. And that's always a big hit. People get up close and personal with one of our target species. As well as we invite many of our partner organizations to come present on things that they might have going on with them, as well as then we also present on how our programs are doing. They also serve as a platform for community discussion on conservation and a chance for anybody in that community to ask any questions that they might have, as well as just strengthen the relationship between us and the local community. This then fosters positive experiences that encourage people to get involved, as well as can be a way to show our appreciations to our participants. So as mentioned, we have several partners. We try and partner with everybody interested in partnering with us. So this includes Nature Conservancy of Canada, Ducks, Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation, the Interpretive Center, Burnout Interpretive Center, PCAP, Native Plant Society of Saskatchewan, Divide, Conservation Action Plan, Grasslands, the local watershed groups, we usually invite them, as well as a number of universities and various levels of government. So a lot of partners. We work hard to bring as many resources to the tables for our participants as possible. And we also recognize that our species are not just ours. So whenever possible, we try and partner with groups in Montana, Texas, Mexico, and invite them to speak. So our latest virtual conservation appreciation dinner, we had some researchers from south of the border, and that was a big hit. Our landowners really enjoyed that one. So of course, a program of 35 years, of course, doesn't come without its challenges, whether that's funding, public perception of conservation, or our more elderly participants selling their land or unfortunately passing away. So in spite of these challenges, we've persevered and kept going strong, and we've gained prominent recognition for our programs. And this really cannot be possible without our community of stewards and our community science approach. So our stewards have continued to support us through thick and thin, and we really owe our success to them. During our face-to-face conversations, usually over coffee, we always are learning new things from our participants and sharing resources with them. And over the years, we really have developed lasting, strong relationships with our landowners that really contribute to conservation in the province. So it's perfectly summed up by this quote from one of our rare plant rescue participants. We treasure the small portion of the natural world that is temporarily under our care. Becoming members of Stewards of Saskatchewan further inspires us to learn more about this land we call home and assists us in sharing its importance with friends and neighbors. And that really sums up our programs, I think. So we owe a lot to our stewards. So I talked really fast. Sorry about that, everybody. But with that, I just wanted to thank you for having me. I hope you enjoyed hearing about our programs. And you can contact me anytime at the email address there if you would like further information. And also a big thank you to our funders and photographers. And a few little plugs here. If you see any of the species I mentioned today, give a hoot and call the hoot line. And as well, I mentioned we are member-based, so we're always looking for new people to get involved. So you can join us. And of course, if you're a landowner, we'd love to hear from you and add you into our stewardship community. And with that, I can take questions.